assume for a moment that I have already been working on my report for a while. And I have this spreadsheet that's coming up where I have put all my changes. So let's go back and take a look at what I've done. I have added a unit. So I went in and I added unit B102. That is something that I was able to type in, right? Gave it a description, the description being something that is useful to you and your state. And then I selected that it's a boiler, right? I selected from the dropdown. Operating, and I'm saying that it started operating in 2022, which is the inventory year I will be reporting. And I've entered all this other information about this unit. And to this unit, I have added a process. P102 is associated to B102. It's a waste oil boiler and it's operating. And here's the source classification code, right? So I think you're beginning to notice that while the user interface means that you may have to click in more places than the bulk upload, there are things that the user interface will make that are perhaps more helpful, depending on your style, depending on what your preferences are. So for example, you might add the unit and the process in the user interface, and then you might be ready to enter the rest of the data in bulk upload. So that could be an option. The use of the template is assuming that you have a lot of knowledge, right? That you have a lot of pre-knowledge, that you know your SEC, that you know some other things, right? So when you're in here, you're going to have to select from that list, and it's quite a big list. So again, I'm going to skip the controls. So let's take a look to the unit B102 and the process P102. I have assigned those, the emissions of those, to these two release points. And I have added 95% go to release point 3 and 5% go to release point 4. And there are no controls here, so I haven't entered anything here. I don't have to worry about that. Here is my new unit and process. And I've entered the throughput. It is a fuel. It is a fuel. So I'm going to be asked to enter the fuel for it. And because my fuel is the same as my throughput, it's really easy. Operating details, I've calculated, all my hours and all that, and entered it here. And now let's take a look at emissions. So here's my new unit process, and I'm reporting PM 2.5. And I just want you to take a look, because what you're going to have to do is look for that unit process. If you are using a US EPA factor, this is what you're going to have to do. If you are not, you may already have your ratio, and you enter it here where it says emission factor. You may have your total emissions, and you would enter them here. That if you're using an EPA factor, you would have to actually enter. You would actually have to go to the tab where the emission factors were that I just showed you, and look for that emission factor and enter it. So what I want to highlight now is the use of a formula, because it's something that is important to know. So here's my PM 2.5, and now I have a formula. So how did I do that? So I went into emission factors, because I am using an EPA factor. Remember, this is for a calculation method, EPA factor. And I find the SEC, and I have the PMs, and I know, and I see that this is the formula, right? Just like I'm going to see that for PM10, there's also a formula. And if I want to know what the name of FA is, I would go to the list of formula variables, and I would find that it's fuel ash content. That's something I'm going to need to know. So I'm in here. So you will notice that it's going to ask you to select the formula from a list. Now I've cheated, right, in the interest of time, and I've already selected it, but just bear in mind that you need to know which formula it is. So again, this has a lot of pre-knowledge, requires a lot of pre-knowledge from the reporter. And what happens is, once I have that formula, if I go to emission factor variables, that formula will show up here. So I'm going to delete this for a moment. If I select this unit process combination, and with that pollutant, that formula shows up here. Does that make sense? I'm going to do that again because it's important for you to see that it's going to ask you for that information. This is a part where the states really want you to pay attention. And so while there are some things that we've talked about automating even more, the fact of the matter is that this is where they really want you to pay attention to what you're doing, which is part of why this is the process. So here you are, you've entered that, and you've entered your formula. Okay, now, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as is. And let's try and upload it because I want to show you what happens.